Okay, so here we are today with Theo Fleury, who I first met, think it was maybe 6, 7 years ago um, at the event. Actually, it's longer than that because it was before I came to Canada.
Right.
So it was the SEED event in Calgary, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we were both speaking, and Theo, in his very direct way, kind of made a beeline and said, I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
And you were at a place where you were ready to look at the nutrition piece.
Yeah.
So, and if anyone has been, under a rock and, around the world who doesn't know who Theo Fleury is that he came to fame as a legendary NHL hockey player. And then he had some added fame by being a bad boy
Yes.
NHL hockey player, and has a life that they make movies out of, and I think they are making a movie out of it. One part of it.
Yes.
But then I came to meet you at a time that was not hockey related, and I'm not a hockey person, so I have allergies to sport,
Yeah.
and my body reflects that. But I came to know you with the work that you're doing with trauma.
Yes.
And was very interested and fascinated in what you're doing. And one of the conversations I'll never forget was when I asked you, I said, on a scale of, 1 to 100, what brings you more sense of joy and satisfaction? Which work, the hockey with all the fame and the accolades, or the work you're doing now helping men, well, not just men, but people heal trauma?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, this one by 100 easily.
Yeah.
So, and so today we're talking about the connection to sugar, addiction, trauma, and I'm going to hand it over to you for a bit to tell people your story with all of that piece, and then perhaps bring it around to sugar.
Right. Yes. Well, I have a pretty extensive history with trauma in my childhood. Mm-hmm. And, for many years, didn't really know the reason why I was doing the things that I was doing.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't until I sort of found my voice and basically told the world what happened to me. And what came from that was really an onslaught of people who said, or they would meet me at a book signing, at a speaking engagement, or, as simple as walking down the street, and they would come up to me and say, hey, I read your book and you told my story. Me too, and then from that, it's been a 10-year education process of, not only trying to figure out my own stuff, but to help people sort of come to a place where, they can choose a path of healing and then stay on that path without, all of the coping mechanisms, that we use to deal with the emotional pain and suffering that's left behind from, our traumatic experiences in life. And, making the connection to trauma, mental health, and addiction, that they all sort of go hand in hand and follow each other. And and then coming to the realization that, I need to find something productive to help me manage my emotional pain on a daily basis, right? And, because we tend to gravitate towards the dark side of life to deal with the trauma and emotional pain, we get involved in alcohol, drugs, food, sex, gambling, these stupid things we call social media. I call it social insanity, and so, it's been a journey where, I've had lots of periods of time where I have felt really well. And then there are other times when I have not felt so well, because as you're unpacking your trauma history and you're unpacking the layers of trauma,
Mhm.
this trauma gets stored in our body, right? And then when we start to, go down that road of, you know, um, unpacking all of this trauma, it's like a big roller coaster ride. And so until we get the tools to, not continue to beat the crap out of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We're going to go to, the most readily available compound on the planet, which is refined sugar,
Mm.
right? And it's in everything. It's in absolutely everything. And not only that, but our pastas are disguised as sugar, right? And so I'd made huge strides, but I'm always gravitating towards food. And what's really kind of interesting, I don't think we've ever had this conversation, but I did some work around food. And because we were so poor as a family, that whatever was put on our plate,
Mhm.
we had to eat it, otherwise we were going to starve. And so now that I can afford to eat at good restaurants and and all that, where you have your appetizer, your salad, your main course, and then what comes at the very end? Well, a nice big reward, of sugar, right? And so, I've had to uh, constantly be aware of, why am I gravitating towards that? Even though I'm not drinking, I'm not doing drugs, da 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 da. Sugar's still a part of my life, right? And because I don't produce enough dopamine and serotonin, sugar's a great replacement for that, right? And so it's this balancing act of physical health.
And the other thing is, you'd mentioned before we started to record, was that you've got 250 dates. You're out on the road speaking,
Yeah.
and managing, trying to find non-sugar options when you're on the road, and doing that it's a big task.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I spend a lot of my time in the Aboriginal community too. So,
Right.
their diet is, all about that, right?
Well, I often say, when I'm working with Aboriginal communities, as I say, you gotta be aware of the white man's diet. The white man brought white stuff, and it's no good for anyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what's the not pemmican, what's the white bread that's
Oh, bannock.
bannock? That's not indigenous food. It's
Yeah.
indigenous people adapted that from the white man's flour, but
Right.
so
Because it was cheap.
well, it was cheap and it was addictive,
Yeah.
it
Mm-hmm.
was, so, and we, more than most, is the mind can justify anything,
Oh yeah.
right? So
Justify, rationalize, all that.
yeah.
So
So tell me, let's go back to when we first met, and I'll tell people about one, the health challenge that you had at the time, and what was going on in your mind that you were ready to look at the food piece. Because I'll give you a little bit of an insight. You told me your age and I didn't believe you. I
mm-hmm.
asked you twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought you were actually 10 years older than me.
Right.
And then when I saw you, it was probably about 3 months later, when we were doing that morning show in Calgary on television. I looked at you and I was like, you got there before me, and we hadn't actually seen each other in person. I'm like, do you have makeup on? And you're like, no, I don't have makeup on. And I didn't believe you again. I'm like, you look so good. You look like 20 years younger than when I saw you when we first started working together. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me about your journey about looking at the food piece.
Well, I'd been traveling a lot, and I was, uh, do you know what? I see my life now as, um, when I surrendered, 13 years ago, I turned my will and my life over to the care of the universe
Mm.
as I understand it. And, I don't question anything anymore. I just go with the flow. It's just easier to do it that way. Because when I run my own life is not a good thing.
Mm.
Right. And so you appeared out of nowhere, and it wasn't by coincidence that we met, right? It was a time when I was ready for to take a look at what I was putting in my body, what I was feeling my body with, and I wasn't happy with the way I looked. I was a little overweight. I looked really pasty,
Mhm.
and you just happened to be sitting right in the booth beside me, which was not a coincidence, right? And I'm a guy that when I make a decision, I do it full out. And so, having the opportunity to talk to you was, a life changing moment and experience. And then, you know, I took your advice and started, feeling my body better. And, the result was 3 months later, I started feeling better, looking better, and I also have Crohn's disease too. So, I have another tick on the, that I don't process food very well because of, having Crohn's disease. And so, all the advice you gave me was really good. But like all of us, um, what I discovered writing the second book was pretty profound when it comes to what trauma teaches us.
Mhm.
Okay. And I found 4 things about what trauma teaches us. So, first thing is abandonment and neglect. Second thing, I'm not good enough.
Mhm.
Third thing, I'm not lovable. And then the fourth thing, which is, um, why East Hastings in Vancouver is so populated with opiate users, is do I even exist in the world? Right.
Mm.
And so 3 months, I'm feeling great, doing great, all this stuff. What am I going to do? I'm going to self-sabotage because I'm not supposed to feel this good. I'm not supposed to look this good. Right. And so we tend to, tear it all down, go back to what we know. And then a month later, we're sick again and we
Mhm.
don't know why.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, isn't that I think a lot of people can relate to that. I love the quote from Maya Angelou that says, when we know better, we do better. But I think when it comes to food,
no.
it's not like, I interviewed a former student of mine who was a cocaine addict, and she said it was way easier to give up cocaine than it was sugar.
Yeah.
And
Nope.
it's the
Nope.
opening statement before we started recording, you said about sugar is what?
Well, you don't have to call your drug dealer.
Yeah.
You just go to a convenience store and it's all right there.
Yeah. It's at the bank, it's at your doctor's office, your dentist's office, like it's everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Hard to escape. Yeah. Yeah.
And because it's so heavily marketed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like working in the field of mental health and trying to teach people that, hey, there's a holistic way of doing this that is every bit as effective, and over the long haul and the long term, is going to get you mentally well, is is a tough mountain to climb, because every what it, there there's 6 minutes of commercials every half hour, and 3 of those commercials are, big pharma, convincing us that there's a magic pill or there's a magic formula that they've come up with, that if you take it, it's going to make you feel better. But at the end of the commercial, they give you 45 side effects of taking this, this drug. And so, food is no different, right? There are lots of side effects from, eating too much sugar or fat, or, whatever it is. And so that's where I'm at right now. Is, again, I'm in a place of, lots of pain because of my former job as a professional athlete, where, because I've done lots of emotional and spiritual work, right? And for 40 years I did all body work. Every day, that's what I did. I worked on my body every single day for 40 years. So then I was like, okay, let's just put that on the shelf for a little while, and let's work on the emotional and spiritual side, which I've done. And now my body's going, hey, you forgot about me, And so it's just been, this roller coaster ride. But I also know that I don't want to go back to, the old way of coping.
Yeah.
Because it has no appeal to me. It's, I always say, I have another relapse in me, but I certainly don't have another recovery in me. You know what I mean? And so, I'm just going to stay on this path, be patient, because it takes time to rewire, your nervous system. And a lot of people think that, a few sessions with, therapist or whatever it is going to be, the magic formula. But, I just say I'm in therapy for the rest of my life, and I'm okay with that. Right.
Yeah.
And then, go and seek out the experts in the field of the stuff that you're working on, and follow what they're doing until the rewiring process happens. And then, right. And then just keep going.
Yeah. And the thing is when you're habituated to eat in a way that you get a dopamine hit 3 to 10 to sometimes 20 times a day, and then you move to healthy food and there's no dopamine hit.
No.
It's like, it's just there to nourish you. It's not there to feed your addiction. It's, that's a lot of deep neural pathways that happens over decades to change. And when you compound that with the trauma piece, and our conditioning is that I feel upset or I feel discomfort, I have this because it calms that. And it's like you were saying with the drugs, it has all these other side effects that then create problems that create more discomfort, and the vicious circle ensues. Yeah.
You get on the hamster wheel and you can't get off, right?
Yeah. So you've been talking a lot, I've noticed, and I've actually had other people say, oh, Theo's talking about sugar lately. So tell me some of the things that you've been talking around the sugar piece, and why you think it's really important that people address this piece.
Well, when I first started this, I thought, the brain was the epicenter for everything, right? That everything was produced here. And then, hanging around with you and hanging around with Kim and, all these experts in the field, had an aha moment where no. Whatever we put into our body gets turned into chemistry and then sent upward. It's not the reverse, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and from my own experience of like binge eating sugar like crazy, like just automatic pilot. I go to the pantry and it's there,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, and then I'm like, okay, wow, that made me feel so good because, I needed some dopamine. I was depressed. I was anxious, all these things. And so, you know, I have to find a way to produce dopamine without, always going back to, the old routine.
Yeah.
Right. And, um, but, like I said, my relationship with food is, whatever's put in front of me, I'm going to eat all of it. Doesn't matter. I don't look at it from, from a neuroscience perspective. I don't look at it from whether it's good for me or not good for me. I'm just going to eat it because, that's the way I was programmed as as a little guy. But as I started to climb the ladder and play sports, you know, they took care of my food requirements, right? Because there was always something in the morning, there was always something for a pregame meal, and the only decision I had to make was what was I going to eat at night. And, back in the day, it was all about protein, right? Eat protein the night before and eat lots of carbs the day of, the game. And, really didn't know why I was doing that. I was just sort of following the masses. But now, it's different. I don't need 10,000 calories a day because I'm not, playing hockey anymore. I'm traveling around and sitting a lot, not exercising a lot. And so, I'm just compounding the problem with, eating unhealthy, right? Which affects my mood, which affects, irritability, restlessness, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's funny, yeah. I'm talking to you knowing exactly what I need to do, but not doing it.
Right. So it's time to get back on the sweet freedom train.
Time to get back on the, it's time to get back on the rails again.
Great. So that's part of the process, is that, like being in therapy for the trauma, a lot of people think that I just do the diet for one thing and then it heals me, or I just naturally do it. It's like, it's especially when food, it's when we know better, we do better. No way. Yeah. It's like being in therapy for life.
Yeah.
As far as, and I think one of the problems with food is that we don't want to put any work into it. We just want it to be easy, and we think that it's actually harder than it is. And when people have said to me, giving up sugar for 30 days is really hard, Sherry. And I say, well, try and source your own food in nature for 30 days. Like, you don't have a supermarket, you can't order anything online, you can't go to a restaurant. Yeah. Compare that hardness to, imagine after 30 days of just being out in the wilderness and trying to source your own food, and then someone says, okay, we're going to put you in the supermarket, but you can only have stuff that doesn't have sugar in it. Even though there are like 10,000 items there in the supermarket that have sugar in it, and you could only find the ones that were like vegetables and naturally occurring sugars, like in fruits and, nuts and seeds, you would think that you hit the holy grail, like the lottery of being able to source your own food. So it's just that we've been habituated to making the choices that give us the dopamine hits. So now to actually make the choices, knowing, I think that's probably one of the things that for me was a big difference, was if I choose this meal, I'm not going to get that dopamine reward.
Yeah.
If I choose this meal, I'm going to get that dopamine reward, but it's going to come at a big cost.
Yeah.
This only adds value. It's like saving money versus spending money. Yeah. Like, mentally.
Well, it's like adding minutes onto your life or taking them off.
Yeah. And you know what? When we're traumatized and we're triggered, we're like, I don't care if I live an extra 10 minutes or 15 minutes or more.
Yeah, because the nervous system, once it kicks in, wow, it's like we're zombies. we just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really important to understand, like, to be really aware of how much of our lives were triggered by that feeling to make ourselves feel better, and understanding that when I have this meal, or I, have this thing that I'm about to eat to satiate my hunger, I'm not going to get the dopamine fix, and I have to be okay with that.
Right.
And so I have to actually figure another way to make myself feel better, self-soothe, or talk myself down, off the ledge, so to speak.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
for me, winter time is the hardest.
it is
And
for
because,
most.
yeah, because, my saving grace in the summertime is I play golf every day. And, there's so much dopamine in that, and so much focus, and, I'm getting vitamin D from the sun. I'm outside, every time I hit a great shot is a hit of dopamine, serotonin, all that stuff. And so when it comes to wintertime, I get depressed, my anxiety's like through the roof, and then, because I'm more busy in the wintertime, I'm also dealing with everybody else's issues and problems. And, you know, basically all I do is I see pain and suffering nonstop every day, all day long, pain and suffering. And, you know, it's manageable, but, I've had to go outside the realm of, natural therapy practices, and reach out to intuitive healers, and all of this stuff to sort of manage, because I didn't realize that people actually plug themselves into me, and when I leave they're still plugged in. I had no idea why that's kind of stuff was even happening. So if I'm not eating well, if I'm not nourishing my body, and these guys are sucking every last ounce of energy out of me, it's like, wow, no wonder I'm depressed. No wonder I'm, anxious, and all of that. And, because I have such a big heart, I just, I want to take it all on. I want to, take away people's pain and suffering, but I can't do it. They have to do it on their own.
That's right.
And it's no different, food wise is, I have to do the work.
Yeah.
Sherry Strong can't do the work for me.
No.
Although I would love for that to, happen, but
yeah.
but it's,
I often say that to my group as, I'd love to come and cook dinner for all of you, but I can't, I can't come and feed you. So the best thing I can do is to teach you how to feed yourself.
Yeah.
And take care of yourself.
Teach a man how to fish.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Or get seaweed if they're vegetarian or vegan like your wife.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. You want to talk about somebody who loves sugar? Oh my God.
Well, that's actually, one of the things in the vegan community that I'm a big advocate of, is because meat's addictive. And when you give up one addictive substance and you're not aware that you're giving up addictive substance, you just swap it. Yeah. And the favorite addictive substance of vegans is sugar and, white flour that converts into sugar.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing within the vegan movement. And one of the films that came out, What the Health, did a disservice to vegans, because they basically said the biggest cause of diabetes is meat, not sugar. As a result, there's all these vegans going, oh, that's great. Sugar doesn't cause diabetes, so I can have tons of sugar. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Bad advice, bad information.
It's so incredible. The messaging around all of this, is pretty wild.
Yeah. And that's why we actually need to learn how to eat like the human species again. It's a reconditioning. And that's why one of the things that I'm really passionate about is the philosophical approach of actually understanding anthropology, sociology of how we've actually evolved to eat as the human species.
Right.
And the further we get from nature, the less healthy we get, but also the less connected we are to our knowing, of what's actually good for us,
Yeah.
and that's a reconditioning that needs to happen. Yeah.
And that's where my expertise comes in, because if you don't deal with the trauma, it doesn't matter. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
That's right.
It does not matter,
Yeah.
and you unpack your trauma history.
Yeah. And that's with Sweet Freedom, with our online program. We go through the 7 steps to actually get you off of sugar. And people are really surprised that it has very little to do with the food. We give you the recipes, we give you, the shopping list, we give you the tools and how to actually think about food. But unless you do the work that actually drives your food choices, the underlying thing, and that's why most programs just deal with the food.
Yeah.
They just deal with the superficial and the physical thing, whereas we go into the mental, emotional, and spiritual drivers
Yeah.
of why we're actually making those poor food choices in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So I wanted to kind of get together and have a chat to you, and to make create more awareness amongst the people that you've been encouraging people to get off of sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got a program that helps get people off sugar, and we don't just deal with the food. We've got the food, we educate you on that piece, but we go into the deep dive of things. And we have a program that's $450, and it basically goes through an 8-week process that helps you get off, but it keeps you in community, because as you know, one of the biggest drivers of addiction is disconnection.
Yeah.
And what happens around our food is we tend to hide out a bit. Like, we can go for a little bit or spurt, we can go a week, a month, or 3 months, and then we kind of pull back. And what we tend to do most often is, when we're triggered and when we've gone back into our poor eating habits, we hide out. And so one of the things we do is we have a community that's, 12 months, a year, you can actually connect into that community and
That's awesome.
help one another. Yeah. So
Well, I am a firm believer in, the way out of this is community.
it is.
That's it. You know, um, we have a pretty cool program that we run through our foundation called meetups, and
Right.
we do them twice a month. And the incredible transformations that we've seen, of people who were suicidal,
Mm-hmm.
walking in the very first time, and seeing them 2 years later as leaders, as peer counselors, as it's been absolutely incredible to watch the process. But the word that we use the most, and what we sort of claim as what we do best, is we use vulnerability to create safety.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have safety, that's when the magic of healing happens, and it happens organically. It's not uh, like all the messaging out there, do this and you'll get this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just show up, just keep showing up, keep, which is a lot of 12-step groups talk about, is, just keep coming back.
Yeah.
No matter how you're feeling or whatever it is, you just have to make a choice. For me, it was like, I know that I can't drink and I can't do a drug ever again in the history of my life.
Yeah.
So if I can do that for alcohol and drugs, then I need to make the same choice when it comes to eating, right? I have to surrender and, turn it over and let it happen. But I'm still like this, right?
Yeah.
The freeze, flight, or fight response, that's it. And this is my relationship with food right at this moment.
Yeah.
Is I'm still fighting, thinking that, I can eat, the way that I ate when I was an athlete.
Yeah.
Right. So which means, I need to learn patience. I need to start the rewiring process slowly, right? Because like first time I met you, I dove right in, did exactly right, because I'm programmed to, the coach draws a play on the board. I'm programmed, he draws on the board, I can do it. You laid out a plan. I did it. That's what happened. But because I hadn't, fully worked on all of my trauma issues, right? Because my biggest trigger is I'm not good enough. That's my biggest trigger. That's the sign that I will pick up and hold over my head constantly. My abandonment issues are non-existent. I love myself, yes. But as soon as I get triggered, not good enough, oh man, that's a tough one,
Yeah. You mentioned the piece about a community and vulnerability and connection. And one of the things I learned doing, Brad Blanton has some work called Radical Honesty. And he has a transparency exercise where you just basically sit in front of an audience and you do stream of consciousness of what's actually going on. And I saw it happen. And then when I did it, and I realized it was the most powerful exercise for me to realize that is one of the quickest, fastest ways to really feel connected and for people to feel connected to you. But it's scary, right? Yeah. It's like doing that work is scary for most of us because most of us weren't raised in an environment where we were comfortable expressing our emotions. Who remembers, shut up or I'll give you something to cry about when you were already crying, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you're traumatized and then you're intimidated, into not actually being able to speak your emotions. So,
well, we weren't allowed to be sad.
No. Well, any uncomfortable emotion you weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when you stuff that, it turns into anger because it's now protection. Yes. Anger is protection.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, that's the hardest thing, especially with men. When I work with men, it's like, it's unbelievable trying to get them to, change and talk about their past.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you think about it, like historically, anger was a very acceptable emotion for men because they were the warriors.
Right.
Right. That fuel to be able to kill a beast. It was much easier if you're angry. Yeah. To go to war, much easier if you're angry. Right. Yeah. So that was the go-to most acceptable emotion.
Well, and that's how I was coached as a hockey player. They coached my anger.
Yeah. And the other interesting thing that I found is that if I'm ever noticing that I'm feeling more anger than normal, I go, oh, like for me, when I'm not eating exceptionally well, my liver, a toxic liver produces anger in the body.
Absolutely.
So it's really fascinating, this vicious cycle of, of how we actually perpetrate things and then create the actual environment in our body that contributes to expressing that emotion or feeling that emotion.
And where is all alcohol processed? In the liver.
And sugars.
Yeah. Well, what is alcohol? Sugar.
Yeah.
That's all it is. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So community's big to be able to actually have that to be vulnerable in. And that's what makes us feel connected and not alone. And, most of us, who have abandonment issues, being alone,
it's a tough one to,
Yeah. And I'm an empath and an introvert. Yes. So when I go into an audience like you, I take on all that energy and it exhausts me and drains me. Right. Yeah. And so getting that connection piece, it's much easier for me to be introverted and hide out. Yeah. So to get that connection piece is, I have to put myself out there. But one of the things I know is conversations like this, where I'm actually, connecting and speaking to you, even though we're not in the same room.
Right.
Those are the things that make life, worthwhile and meaningful.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's friendships. It's people that, are sort of working on the same plane,
Mm.
trying, you're using the food side of it, you know, I'm dealing with the trauma but it doesn't matter what we use. We got to get rid of it, and that rewiring process, takes a long time. That's why all these diets out there, they don't work,
They don't.
because if you have trauma, you're going to self-sabotage it eventually, you
Yeah.
know? And so, yeah, exercise, eat well, do all those things, but don't forget about the reason why you ended up eating all of this nasty stuff
Yeah.
was because it helped numb out the emotional pain and suffering that you're going through.
Yeah.
So,
And,
but I found in community, that's where it all gets laid out. And if there's no judgment, if there's only support and love and compassion and empathy and vulnerability and all those things, that's when people make the greatest strides, because they're actually working on the piece that they absolutely need to work on
yeah.
in order to stop eating sugar.
Yeah. And the other piece that I think is really important, what you're seeing in your community, is that people are coming in wanting to kill themselves, but they're coming out the other side with a sense of meaning and purpose, becoming leaders because they're now contributing. They've gone on their hero's journey. They've been to the depths, the darkness of despair. They've had the call, to do something more in their life. They've refused that. They might have gone back again, but when they step up and accept the call to then take what they've learned and bring it back to their community, it's another piece of the puzzle that helps keep you on track to actually do the work.
Yeah.
And even if you have relapses when it comes to the food piece, I truly believe that if you can, I help people deal with an arsenal of whys. So we've got the low whys, which are kind of the superficial, the physical, the egoic whys. And for some people, they're really powerful. And then the mid whys are more kind of the intellectual, why am I doing this? That kind of thing. And then the high whys are the meaningful, like they're heart and gut centered. And that really kind of fits with passion and purpose and how you're actually in the world to make the world a better place, which is why when I asked you that question about how is the hockey versus the work you're doing now, as far as, what's the most exciting and fulfilling, you're like, here. But in order to do this for any kind of sustainability, because you're not in your 20s anymore playing hockey, you need to fuel this in a way that supports longevity.
Yeah.
So it's a marriage of many kind of things. So I want to let people know that we're going to create something really special for anyone who comes to us through you, who wants to actually do this work and deal with the food piece and sugar and get that under control. And we want to be able to help people in conjunction with the work that you're doing. If we can actually also work on the fuel and the food piece, what I believe is that when we can get the food piece handled, we're able to do so much more of this work of actively working to heal the planet, like to heal people.
Yeah.
And there's this great thing that happens, is that when we eat in a way that heals our body, it actually heals the world.
Yes.
And when we actually clear and our brains aren't on drugs, which sugar is a drug, we're able to process information much more difficultly, much more easily, and handle difficulty. And that when things are actually coming at us that are triggering our trauma, we're in a different place than when we're buzzed out on sugar. Yeah. So we're able to handle all of that stuff more.
Oh, we're present, right? Yeah. We can't do the work if we're not present.
Yeah.
Right. And, but what's interesting is, this is like an underground movement, right? That doesn't get a whole lot of hoopla and, and yeah.
Money off of it. That's
Yeah,
why.
exactly. And so, yeah, but I think the biggest thing that I've allowed myself to have is patience,
Mm,
right? Is, you know, uh, and I compare it to golf because when you're playing golf, you can never perfect it,
yeah.
right? One day you can go out and shoot under par, and then the next day you can go out and shoot 20 over par. And you're like, this is the same person, same body, same everything. But what happened, you know, in this 24-hour period, where I was on one day and today I'm off, right? So, and that's, that's all about, you know, rewiring our trauma experiences.
And it's a great analogy for the food piece, is that you play the long game with food piece. It's not about how am I eating today, and that makes the sum of all my days, whether I'm good or bad. And there's the piece around patience is that you're going to mess up. Like, you're going to make bad food choices. I still do it. I mean, I've been working in this field for almost 40 years, and I still mess up.
Yeah,
Like I haven't perfected my golf game, my food game, right?
yeah,
But if
exactly.
I'm patient, I play the long game. And the other piece that's really important is forgiveness. So
Yeah.
forgiving yourself for when you do mess up, and just, being so super loving, kind, like you'd be to your child or someone else
Hmm.
if they messed up or they didn't get the right shot, right?
Well, that's the biggest piece I'm working on right now
Yeah. Yeah.
is, the forgiveness piece,
Right.
right? And it's hard. It's hard, you know?
It is. And it's a process.
Yeah.
It's a long game. It's not lose weight to fit into the bikini. It's not,
No,
to
no.
beat a disease. It's about how we live kind of permanently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there anything that you would like to leave people with, just last little piece around facing even the thought of giving up sugar,
Mm.
of
Well, a lot of people that I work with, when I talk about forgiveness, they get triggered.
mm,
So we've come up with another phrase called self-compassion,
right.
right? Because words sometimes,
Yeah.
trigger people, but I I, I think it's just a matter of it's always one day at a time. That's it. And don't think about what happened in the past. Don't think about the future. Think about what do I need to do today in order to uh, try to be present enough to do the work that I need to do on a daily basis.
Mm,
Because we're so programmed to achieve greatness and achieve all this stuff, and we're living in the future. For example, I lived pretty much my whole entire life in my past, right? I lived it all in the past. And now I try to bring as much as I can into the present, because in the work that we both do, if we're not present, we're not helping anybody. We're not helping anybody. Then if we don't have compassion and we don't have self compassion or forgiveness, or uh, you know we need to use our vulnerability. The hardest thing for us to do is talk about our trauma, right?
hmm
So by using vulnerability to create a safe space to allow other people to come into the conversation is incredibly important, right? And so you've had a relationship with food that you're now using the vulnerability of your past experience with food to help others create safety, because they go, right, everybody's going to have a Me Too moment, right? It doesn't have to be sexual abuse or whatever it is. You know, the vulnerability creates the Me Too moments. And that's why, you know, my speech is called The Power of Me Too, because, you know, when we step into a place of vulnerability, we're going to get a Me Too moment, right? Because somebody in our audience, somebody in our sphere of relationships, whether that's work, at the gym, you know, wherever it is that we're in relationship with people, the reason why we're friends is because we share a piece in our past that is the same, right? And so, you know, for me, I am feeling physical pain for the first time in my life. I'm feeling physical pain for the first time in my life, because in the past, when that happened, go have a couple beers, you know, so that I totally disconnected from the physical pain, but I had to do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to perform if I didn't train myself to block out pain.
Yeah.
Right. Well, now it's like, oh my God, like I am feeling physical pain, you know, for the first time in my life, which is like a whole new thing. And what's interesting is I'm also feeling the emotional stuff from blocking out the physical part of it, right? So my inner child is, you know, screaming at me like, hey, you know, it's time to reconnect here.
Yeah.
Right. And so yeah.
What's
So if I had any profound words of wisdom, is just, it's just patience and baby steps, right? You know,
yeah.
because, you know, I always say I'm going to live till I'm 150. So I have 100 years left to, you know, take care of myself. So that's what I'm going to do. Right. And I'm going to have good days. I'm going to have bad days. I'm going to have crazy days, all that. It's just part of the process of healing. That's it.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not going to die, because I'm a hypochondriac too. So you can throw that in there. So I've been retraining, you know, because for me, physical always triggers the emotional. Right. So if I'm dizzy, I'm like, oh, I got a brain tumor, I'm going to die. You know, all this thoughts come to my head. I don't think like that anymore, because I've rewired, you know, that process. But still, man, like it's just a never ending unpacking of self, always. Right. And so, you know, be patient and baby steps. That's it, you know, and stay connected. Stay connected to, you know, the people that care about you and, you know, want to see you do well. And listen. Just listen, you know. I don't think you always have to come up with the magic catchphrase. You know?
Yeah.
I think being present and being attuned and listening is, you know, one of the greatest skills I've acquired on this journey, is that I don't need to give advice. I just need to be there. That's it. Right.
That's one of the biggest things about us feeling connected, is when someone's really heard us. We feel, like you said, we exist, right? When someone's really there just to bear witness to you saying what it is you want to say. I exist. I'm connected. You know, it ticks all the boxes for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You matter.
Yeah. That you matter. Yeah.
Well, and what I always tell people is, hey, we need your story.
Yeah.
Right. I need your story.
Yeah.
Right. And so Well, it goes back to ancient times. When there was no TV, there's no social media. What did you do? Build the fire, sit around a circle, and talk.
That's right.
So, you know, I don't know why it's, gone to the other end of the spectrum, but that's what's
Because
happening.
we think we're doing it with this, but we're not.
No, there's no connection in that.
Yeah.
You
It's
know?
another dopamine hit.
Yeah, that's all it is, right? Same as gambling. It's
Yeah.
just pure dopamine and serotonin, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Theo, for spending this time together today. I can't help but think there'll be other people who can hear themselves and see themselves in this chat, and hopefully that they're willing to take the leap and have the courage to look at the food piece as you have done and are doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, courage is contagious when we show people courage, but vulnerability and courage go hand in hand. So
they do.
the more
Yeah.
vulnerable you are, the more courageous you are.
Yeah.
That's my experience.
Yeah. I call it emotional bungee jumping.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, can you remember the first time you told your story about food? How
Well,
scary that was?
yeah. And being concerned that I wouldn't be considered a professional. And then for me, what was even scarier than the food piece was talking about the sexual abuse, and the rape and that, how that actually played into my relationship with food. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And
yeah,
it affected me too,
of
right?
course. Yeah. Yeah.
In hockey, you got to look a certain way. You got to, you know, there was a certain body type that, you had to keep that all in, so.
Yeah. Here's an interesting aside story. I met someone recently, of a woman who reminded me of you. I was like, she was so masculine. Like she had some of the same kind of the holding her body and guarded type. And I couldn't help but wonder if she'd had, similar abuse in her background, because I just thought, yeah,
Right.
it was like,
Well, we know.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And she had all the armory, in her front body to kind of,
Well, that's what I tell people nowadays is if you have a trauma experience, if you've had a trauma experience, which is the majority of us,
yeah,
said, you may not realize this, but you're a healer on this planet
yes,
because that's,
yeah,
whatever you get, you got to give it away.
yeah,
Right. And that's the healer's piece that, we tend to think what happened to us doesn't have a purpose. Well, everything that happened to us, pain is a great motivator, gets us to change.
you
And
can.
if we don't learn the lesson in the pain and the suffering, we're going to stay stuck.
It presents itself until we learn it.
So if you embrace the pain as, oh my God, here's the universe telling me, here's another opportunity for me to heal and change.
Yeah.
As opposed to, oh my God, here it is again. Like, oh.
Yeah.
Right.
Because don't you think sometimes when you're stuck in the cycle and sometimes you question, well, can I really ever change? Right? Like,
yeah. But that's the key to all of it. We can all change.
that's right.
And, I look at myself, well, you've known me for 10 years. How much have I changed? How much have you changed?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Because
Yes.
we can't see it.
Yeah.
We can't see it. But
I know.
everybody else sees it. Right?
I laugh sometimes when people will describe me as, oh, you're so calm and peaceful and all this kind of stuff, and they'll describe me in a way, and I was like, now if you describe me that way to my ex-husband, he'd be like, who I've been divorced with from 18 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he'd be like, no, I don't think you're talking about the same person.
But that to me is the law of attraction, not promotion.
What do you mean?
So I always tell this story. So when I got sober, I had 500 phone numbers in my phone book, right? Who I partied with and
Right.
thought were like my closest friends, but
Mm.
they're actually my 10 o'clock friends, right? Because at 10 p.m., everybody's hammered, everybody's inhibitions are all gone, and it's the old, I love you, man, you're my best friend, you know, all that stuff, right? So what I did is I called all 500 numbers, and I said, listen, I made a choice, made a decision. I'm not drinking, not doing drugs, not going to bars, you know, so don't ask me to do that. But if you'd like to come to my house, I'll cook you a nice dinner. For the first time in our relationship, we'll actually have a meaningful conversation. You know how many friends I had left? Two. Two of 500.
Oh
Okay.
my God.
But what's happened is as I went on my sobriety journey, I would run into these 500 people and they would go, wow, you look incredible. What are you doing? Now I get to promote, right? So it's the law of attraction, not promotion, right?
I get it.
And it's, you know, the better we look, the calmer we are, you know, all this stuff, we start to bring all those people back into, you know, our lives. And so, so that's, you know, that's really important in this journey and in this process is you may not think that you're doing the work, but you are doing the work because as soon as you run into all those people that you sort of disassociated yourself with because they were harmful to your process, they start to come back.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you know, all the people that we've hurt in relationship, they come back too because there's that thing called forgiveness.
Yeah.
And as long as you're trying, as long as you're, you know, trying to do the next right thing, you know, those people, you know, and I always say I got to play the country music record backwards. I got my dog back, got my car back, got my house back, got my girl back, you know, I got everything back.
Yeah.
But as soon as I go back to the old ways, that all disappears again.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, just stay on the path. Stay on the path.
Yeah.
Stay on the path and hang out with the winners.
That's it.
Hang out with the winners. Hang out with the people that are doing
the
it.
Listeners.
Yeah. The listeners. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. So
cool. I think that's a really great place to finish today. Thanks for your time.
Anytime.
Appreciate it.